Hello friends, my name is Dasha. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the best books that I read in 2020 as well as my favorites. So I am really excited to talk about all of these. These are obviously like best of the year. Not necessarily books that were published this year, just my favorite ones that I read, the best ones I read. And since I could not narrow it down too much, I want to start with a few honorary mentions because I want to give some love to all these amazing books I read. I mentioned this in my most disappointing books, but I do have a stats video coming on like all my star ratings, how many pages, how many books, all of that. That will be coming, or it will already be up. If it is up, I will link it so you can kind of see more in-depth stats. But this year was amazing for me because I had a ton of 4- and 5-star reads. And it's not because I don't rate stuff critically, I just read a ton of really good books, so it was hard to narrow down which ones I really wanted to kind of showcase, which is why I'm starting with a few honorary mentions. So let's get into those. The first book I want to talk about is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is my bind-up of the 3 books in the Area X trilogy, but I've only read Annihilation, and it was incredible. So this is basically a kind of speculative sci-fi fantasy series following this area called Area X that is super mysterious. Anytime a research party goes there, they come back with different results. Some of them get super sick, some of them end up killing each other, killing themselves, some of them come back and say everything was fine and dandy. So you're following the most recent expedition out to Area X. And this was such a surprise and such an absolutely incredible read. It is very short. I have it here, this is where the second one starts, so it's only this long. They're super short books, very weird. The writing is definitely very poetic and very odd, but the imagery that it gives you is so beautiful, and it truly was just a really unique book. I've never read anything like it, and I felt as though all of the little details in the world that he mentioned, like all of the little things in the scenery, and the fact that the researchers that are going there don't have names, they just refer to each other by their titles, so the psychologist, the anthropologist, I felt as though it was a really interesting touch. The way this book makes you feel insane because you don't know what's happening either is just amazing, and this was definitely a standout for me. I think about it all the time. I don't know if I want to continue the series because I heard the rest of it doesn't quite focus on Area X itself as much, but more on some like politics and people. But Annihilation was incredible, definitely one of my favorites of the year, and I mean I recommend all of these books, but like I really want people to pick this one up more and kind of just dive into it and see what they can get out of it because it's definitely one of the most unique and incredible books I've ever read. The next book I'm quickly going to mention is World War Z by Max Brooks. This is an adult sci-fi, sometimes classified as horror. It basically is about if a zombie apocalypse broke out, but it is formatted in a bunch of interviews with people all over the world that dealt with it in their own separate ways. So you follow some military people, you follow some doctors, you follow some absolutely regular normal people, and this was such a surprise, but I cannot stop thinking about how well written this book was. I cannot stop thinking about how touching it was, how much human emotion and humanity there was in it despite it being about a zombie outbreak. I also thought that the military parts to this book were so cool, and I quite frankly like cannot get enough of that. I could have gone on with this book for so much longer. I really enjoyed it. So this was definitely a standout for me this year. The next honorary mention I don't have with me, but it is Uzumaki by Junji Ito. This is a horror manga, basically following this small town that gets infected with spirals. Sounds fucking wacky. It absolutely works, and I absolutely loved it. This was the first manga I've ever read. First graphic novel, I'm pretty sure too, but this one was just so beautifully done, and the images are still haunting me. And in terms of horror itself, the fact that the depictions of it were just so disgusting and fucked up, and like I'd hate to know what Junji Ito sees when he closes his eyes at night because that man has got issues, but I am here for all of them. I can't wait to read more of his books. This one was just such a special one. I've never seen anything like it, and I don't think I ever will. I fucking loved it. It was truly one of a kind. And the last book I want to quickly mention is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is a retelling of Patroclus and Achilles as if they were lovers, and it is beautiful and heartbreaking. But, spoiler alert, I have another Madeline Miller book on the list that actually made it to my favorites. That's not just an honorable mention. Did I say honorary the whole time? Honorable mention. I'm an absolute fucking moron. Honorable mention. So the other Madeline Miller book is not just an honorable mention, it is my favorite book of the year. Hint, hint. But The Song of Achilles was truly just so beautiful. It made me tear up. It was just a delight to read. You sunk into it and you just got lost in her, like the world that she created, even though it existed. She just took it to a whole new level, and I absolutely love her writing. All right, so we're going to quickly go through two nonfiction favorites. I've talked about these recently, but I really want to stress how much I absolutely love these. So the first one I want to talk about is Kilo by Toby Muse. This is a nonfiction account of the cocaine cartel wars in Colombia. Toby actually goes there and he talks to locals and he talks to policemen and he talks to farmers and he talks to all these different people involved. And you get a really good view of the actual process from the product to the delivery and everything in between. And of course, for all of these books, if I did talk about them this year, the wrap-ups will be linked right up here. But I'm going to go through all of my feelings for them again because I think they just deserve all the love. Kilo was so eye-opening to me. I felt as though it's one of those books that everyone should read, or at least everyone that has a bit of a social life, because we've all been at a party and seen our friends in the corner buying a little, you know, a little baggie of Coke, and you truly don't realize the impact of your actions until you see it laid out in front of you like this. This book was just so earth-shattering to me, and listen, like, it's not like we didn't know that these things existed, but it's a lot harder to ignore it when you sit down and read about it and read about real people who are involved in it and what they think about it. It's truly just like heartbreaking. I cannot stop thinking about this book. It was very well written and it was very well, I don't even want to say well researched, because the author is a journalist. He went to these places and he talked to these people. It's just, it talks about everything from A to Z. You really see the hopelessness of the situation in Colombia, and it's just like, it's heartbreaking, and I really think that it's something everyone should read if they want to stay at all informed on the current events, because yes, it's not like a big natural disaster that happens or some kind of tragedy where we hear about it in the news, but it's ongoing and it has been ongoing, and it's just mind-boggling to me that we don't hear about it, we don't think about it, but this is the reality that a ton of people face, and it blew me away. This was an incredible fucking book. The other nonfiction book I want to talk about is Permanent Record by Edward Snowden. This is his kind of account of a bit of his life, but also his decision to expose the NSA and the CIA and all the government agencies for spying on American citizens. He was the whistleblower that exposed this many years ago, and he basically decided to go from A to Z of his account within the government and just, you know, tell us why he decided to do what he did. And this was so touching. This was so incredibly important, I think, because there's a lot of discourse now. People are kind of talking about it again because of the, you know, the current election state, and all of these issues are kind of being brought up again. And people are talking about whether, you know, whistleblowers should be considered patriots, whether whistleblowers should be pardoned, or whether they should be considered traitors. And it's a fascinating discussion, and I feel as though if you really want to be even more informed about that discussion, I think this is a really good book to read, because you see that Edward Snowden is not malicious. He does not seem to have any ill will. He just saw something that was not right, and he wanted to do his best to right it, and I really respect that. And I really thought that the way it was written was just very heartwarming, but also very kind of tough love. I think I said it in my wrap-up where I talked about this, but like, you realize how much the government does not give a shit about you. They never have your best interests at heart, and the sooner we realize that, the sooner we can attempt to change it and at least try to implement some kind of changes to make our lives more intentional and to make sure that the government does try to stay accountable and keep our interests at heart. So I felt like this book was a really good starting point for that kind of awakening. No, don't grow class consciousness, you're so sexy. But truly, I think this is a book that will stick with me for a really, really long time. It was really incredible. It was absolutely beautifully written. It was really impactful. It was very emotional. Like, I laughed. I felt really, really sad. I really felt for him. And it was just overall, like, 10 out of 10 book. Would absolutely hope to inspire at least one person to read it on my recommendation. Honestly, that's all I could ask for. So now we're going to get into fiction. So these are a little bit of an order. Obviously, I'm saving my favorite book for last, but I will also kind of try to somewhat rank them in terms of like how much of a favorite, you know, whether it's like favorite of the year or like all-time favorite. So we are going to start with Pet Sematary by Stephen King. So this is a horror book about a family that moves into a small town, and they basically meet their neighbor across the street, and he introduces them to the pet cemetery where local kids go to bury their dead animals, but it becomes a lot more sinister than that as the story progresses. And I did not think this book was that impactful when I read it. I definitely enjoyed it, obviously, and I was like raving about it, but I did have some issues with Stephen King's writing that I still obviously have. But the more time went on after I read it, the more I still thought about it constantly. I really think that it was just such a well-crafted story. I think that the themes that Stephen King explored were really well done. I felt that everything was just very deliberate, and I really enjoyed how I don't know how he like weaved the whole story together. It all makes sense. It was all really, really interesting, and I loved my reading experience of it, and it just solidifies the fact to me that Stephen King is an author that I do enjoy. Yes, you kind of gotta wade through the shit of his books, but there are some truly incredible ones in there, and this one is, I knew I was gonna enjoy it, I just didn't know I was gonna enjoy it this much, and it's definitely a favorite of the year, and it's one of my 2 favorite Stephen King books now, for sure. Another favorite of the year was Death Note, the Black Edition Volume 1, so Volumes 1 and 2 of the regular editions. This is by Tsugumi Oba, and this is the story of Light, who is this exceptionally gifted kid who's getting very bored with real life until one day he discovers the Death Note, which is a notebook left behind by a death god, and if you write someone's name in it, they will die. This was so much fun. I absolutely loved this first edition. The way the story was set up, the way the author kept you on your toes and was always 2 steps ahead of even the reader. I felt like everything was just so well crafted in this one. I have also read the second volume of the Black Edition, so volumes 3 and 4, and I did not like them quite as much. I felt as though the plot was definitely a lot better in here. The characters that we had to work with were much more interesting. We were able to really sink our teeth into them, and I felt that overall this was just more enjoyable to read. I was really on the edge of my seat and absolutely loving every minute of it, and it truly was such a fun experience. I really didn't think that I would like it as much as I ended up liking it. I loved the Shinigami death god that was just hanging in the background behind Light all the time. I really loved what Light decided to do with the Death Note. I love the behind the scenes of the police trying to figure out who is doing these killings. I was maybe a little bit worried that there was going to be all these deep discussions about who gets to kill, or at least Light would maybe have a bit more of an internal conflict, but everything was just so well done. Every character decision made sense, and overall this was just such a fun read, and I cannot wait to continue with the series. Even though the second one wasn't my favorite, I definitely still really enjoy the series, and I can't wait to see what happens to Light and his death god. The next book I want to talk about is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. So this is a classic story about a man who gets his portrait painted, and then when he looks upon it, he realizes that he's going to grow older and uglier, but his painting is going to stay as beautiful as the day it was painted. And by some act of magic, the reverse happens. Dorian Gray does not age, but his portrait does. This has become a new favorite of all time for sure. I thought it was just so much more than that kind of plot. It was definitely much more insightful, and there was a lot of very interesting commentary about society and humanity and beauty and vanity and art that I absolutely loved. This book is tabbed to hell because I just found everything in here so interesting. I have a lot of notes in here too because I love interacting with books that make me think that way, and I kind of respond to the books. So for me, this was such an interesting reading experience. I think it's a book that I'll be able to come back to every couple years and get something new out of it, and I love being able to do that with my books. And I really found that it's one of those that maybe I don't think about it all the time, but something happens in real life and I'm like, I remember this. I've seen this before, and it's just one of those books that I can absolutely see why it's been a favorite for so many people over, you know, couple hundred years, for the love of God. Like, this book's been around for a while and it's beloved for an absolute reason. I can see it, and it's absolutely a new favorite of mine now. The next book I want to talk about is God's Grave by J. Kristoff. This is the second book in his Nevernight Chronicles series, which follows Mia, who is a girl who decides to go to an assassin school to get her revenge for her parents who were murdered by her government. And it's this creative, magical world where there are like 3 suns. There's a lot of lore behind it and religion. And while I did love the first book, which really followed Mia at that school, the second book had a bit of like a gladiator setting, and it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. That aspect of like the gladiator fights and the way the world really opened up in the second book and the way the lore was such a heavy part of it was absolutely my favorite. The twists and turns in the second book were even more shocking than the last. It was so bloody, so brutal. Honestly, like, the Nevernight Chronicles are one of my favorite series for sure, but this second book was truly unmatched. Second book syndrome, we don't know her. It was so fucking full of action and gore and sex and all the good stuff, and I was here for every minute of it. It was so much fun. Oh my god. A+. The next book I want to talk about is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. So this is a release from this year. It's an adult fantasy debut. It basically follows Lynn, who is the Emperor's daughter, as well as a few other characters like a smuggler and an official on a different island. And it's, I believe, a Chinese-inspired world, but it's set on these little islands in a big sea. The world is very, like, water-based, and all the islands kind of float around and migrate, and it's just so stinking unique. And the whole point of it being called the Bone Shard Daughter was because the magic is based on bone shards, which are pieces of bone taken from the citizens of the Empire, and they are inscribed with commands that get put into these constructs, which function as, you know, soldiers or spies or dock workers. And it's such a unique magic system, and the characters were so fucking good. I have not seen a ton of people read this book yet, at least that I follow on BookTube, and I just really want more people to pick this up because I was truly floored at how beautiful the writing was and how heartbreaking the relationships were. Even though there's like a bit of a, I don't want to call it like a revolution plot, there's definitely some unrest. No one's seen the Emperor in a long time. He's locked up in his palace just working on his, you know, bone shards, and people are starting to get frustrated with the real problems that are in the Empire. It's not quite a revolutionary plot, but there is definitely some unrest. But the whole of the story is not about that. It's about the people, and it's so beautiful and so captivating. I literally sped through this book in 2 days. I cannot say enough good things about it. If you're looking for a very unique fantasy, you need to pick this one up. I think this is just truly a spectacular book. I can't believe how much of an impact it's had on me, and I cannot wait to read the rest of the series. So our penultimate book is going to be A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. This is the first book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series, which is a fantasy series following a bunch of houses of Westeros that are fighting for control over the Iron Throne. A lot of political intrigue, a lot of death, a lot of sex, a lot of fucked up stuff. It's a good time. If you haven't been on my channel, I have been doing a full read of the series throughout the last half of the year, and I've been absolutely loving it, but I think the first one is still my favorite, and I'll tell you why. First of all, I do love the whole series. I will say that. I think some books are obviously stronger than others, but the whole series is just so well crafted and well thought out that I cannot like recommend it enough. But this one truly had the best mix for me of political intrigue and action scenes and character work and world building, but it didn't feel like the first book in a series. It felt like a very good book on its own. This is the only one of the series so far that I've given 5 stars to because I felt like it was the best rounded book. We also follow a bit more of the Starks. The world hasn't completely opened up yet, so it does follow the Starks more than any other family, which is obviously, like a lot of people, one of my favorite families, if not my favorite. There's just so many interesting personalities within that one house that I absolutely love. This is one of the only adult like high fantasy series that I have read, so who knows, my opinion may change down the road after I read Eye of the World or the Stormlight Archive. I don't know yet, but for me, this is truly such a well-crafted story that I could not imagine it not being a favorite for the rest of my life. There's so many elements I love about this, but the character work is just truly impeccable. The writing is so fucking beautiful, full of yearning and heartbreak and atmosphere, and I love this series so much, and this first book really encapsulates everything I love about the series, and I'm excited to finish it up. I hope that he releases the next book sometime within my lifetime, but if not, like, I think this one could be one on its own that I could just reread forever and ever because it's just so fucking good on its own. I love that it doesn't feel like a first book in a series. It is complete. It is so full of everything I love about this series, and it truly deserves a spot as one of my favorite books of all time. And the last book I want to talk about, I'm sure will come as no surprise given my spoiler from earlier, and if you know me at all, Cersei by Madeline Miller. Oh my baby, this is my favorite book of all time, I think. This is truly something special. So this is basically a fictionalized account of Cersei's life. Now Cersei appears in the Iliad on Odysseus' journey as just a little part of his journey, but Madeline Miller decides to open up her world and give us all of Cersei and weave her in with other tales that we know and love from Greek mythology, and I loved every minute of it. First of all, the writing. Madeline Miller has the perfect writing style for Greek mythology. It feels so timeless, it feels so classic. It just was made for Greek stories. I can't describe it, you need to read it for yourself, but it feels like she is one of the greats writing an epic. Cersei's story was just so beautiful too, because Cersei is too godlike to really walk among humans, but she's too human for the gods to really accept her. So she doesn't feel like she fits in, but she is still clearly this incredible being that, I don't know, it's just, oh my god, this fucking book, y'all. I loved it so much. I related to it so much. The writing was so achingly beautiful. It felt like the universe was like opening up in front of you. I felt like I really just sunk into the story, and I was absorbing it, and it was a part of me, and I was shocked when it ended because I could have read about Cersei forever. And I find it interesting on the cover it says it's an epic spanning thousands of years that's also a keep you up all night page turner, and that's a very good way to describe like the pacing of it. And it does feel that way because she is daughter of Helios, so she is a god, but she's a witch, so she has her own kind of abilities, and it truly, like, it spans her whole immortal life, or a large part of it anyways, and all of the things she comes across. But it also has this element of like, you want to read more, you want to find out what happens to her, you want to find out what happens next, and I truly connected to it on a way I never have with any other book, and oh my god, I love it so much. I love it so fucking much, y'all. This was how mortals found fame, I thought. Through practice and diligence, tending their skills like gardens until they glowed beneath the sun. But gods are born of ichor and nectar. Their excellence is already bursting from their fingertips. So they find their fame by proving what they can mar. Destroying cities, starting wars, breeding plagues and monsters. all that smoke and savor rising so delicately from our altars, it leaves only ash behind. Her writing is just truly on another level, and I need anything else that she ever writes in my hands this instant. I love Madeline Miller. I cannot get enough of her, truly, and this is now my favorite book of all time. I feel so many things about this book. Also, I hold like a personal grudge towards book 2 because when this book was released, a lot of people were like disappointed by it or didn't like it, and I just want to know, like, how? Why? This is incredible. I can't get enough of it, and I don't understand how other people can't. I know reading is subjective, but in this case, you're all wrong. Sorry. So that was it for my favorite and the best books of 2020. Let me know what your favorite book of the year was down below. My social media is also linked down below, so you can always go talk to me there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.